We are live. Hey, everybody, welcome. So, I'm Rob, and I'm in recovery from a gambling addiction. I run the account ODAT Gambling Awareness, and this is.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm host of the Broke Girl Society podcast, and I am almost 4 years in recovery from gambling related harms, gambling addiction. And I say almost, I will get there. I'm
Yeah.
not worried about it, but I'm still a little bit shy of that. And we only count the days we're living, right?
Hey, fair enough. You gotta keep it real. Laying it all out there for people adds that extra layer of just like making sure we're as honest as possible. And
Accountability.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have people tuning in now. So if you're in the audience, what I'm gonna ask you to do is to leave a comment asking any questions that you have about gambling, gambling addiction, addiction recovery, mental health, whatever you want to talk about. And Christina and I are gonna take our best response that we can and fire it right back at you live here on the account. Christina, any kind of
Please be
questions you want
nice.
people? Yeah, please be. Now we'll see what happens. I can't ever guarantee that. But any kind of questions you would like to see coming in today?
I'd like to see like just questions about recovery in general, or like questions about resources. Questions. I'm open to even questions like how did I get so far in recovery? So anything that can be helpful. Um, Amy, hi Amy.
Yeah, let's throw her up there. Here from the BGS. So the BGS, for those that don't know, is the group that Christina runs. Christina, why don't you give just like a quick summary of what your group does?
Yeah, so the Broke Girl Society has a Facebook group, and it's specific to women in recovery. I feel like it's important that women have a safe space to, talk about not just the gambling aspect, right? But just about life in general. And oh, Erin's here too. We literally we have 3 meetings in the Broke Girl Society. We have a Sunday meeting, we have a Tuesday meeting, and we have a Thursday meeting. And I've got a wonderful group of ladies who help me facilitate these meetings. I host the Sunday meeting. I literally was like, hey guys, write it straight time just a few minutes ago. I'm like, I've got to go. The famous Rob from ODAT has asked me to join his live, and I couldn't resist. And so we've got a few of the ladies who just joined me um, here from the Broke Girl Society. It's an extremely supportive space. You can go in, you can post about how you're feeling, about not just like the gambling aspect of it, but like navigating the family aspect, navigating the financial aspect, navigating all these different factors that really impact where we're at in our own recovery. And so it's a really, really, I personally, and I could be a little bit biased, think it's an amazing space.
Perfect. And if anyone wants to find out more information about that and you're watching on YouTube, you can check the description of this video. But we're waiting on some questions to roll in. It's a little bit slow. Let's see. Oh, we got one finally. All right. Say you just lost, plug in any dollar amount there. How do you cope with that? How do you cope with a financial loss in gambling? Well, let's actually take it two ways. One is you're still gambling, and one is you had a slip and you went back. So maybe let's start with the slip, because I feel like that's probably the group that we could help the most.
Yeah, well, the chasing losses, right? Like that is one of the hardest parts of entering recovery and leaving gambling behind. But they're like, oh, all this money I've lost. Like, what do I do about it?
Hmm.
And the way that I looked at it, like, it wasn't about the money for me. So my thoughts on this is probably going to be different than maybe somebody else's. It wasn't about the money for me. So I didn't struggle even when I was doing my financial inventory as part of my step work. Like I didn't really struggle with the number. Like I can always make more money. I can go to work, I can do that. So I had to just let it go, because if not, I was just going to keep adding to that debt.
Yeah.
Like what might be $1,000 today will be $2,000 tomorrow. And then before you know it, it becomes this astronomical number that you're just going to keep spinning your wheels. You're on this hamster wheel.
Mhm.
You're not going to get off if you're like, how do I get this money back? Like that's what the operators want you to do. They want you to try and get that money back, right? And at the same time, you're just giving them more. So I think
Exactly.
it's
And I think that I kind of have a similar answer. It's like we had to lose this amount to learn the lesson. Now, this is if you have your head on straight and you're like thinking, all right, I'm trying to leave gambling in the past. I'm ready to stop. Any losses that you experienced is what you had to lose to learn that gambling was going to wipe you out if you kept going. It will become 2,000. It will become 4,000. It will become 8,000 if you keep plugging away at it, regardless of how fast that does end up happening. But when I was gambling and I would lose money, you know how I would cope with it, Christina? I would say, oh, that's bad luck. And then what would I do? I'd end up putting more in and more in and more in. And it ends up going to shit every single time. And so, the good way to cope with it is to understand it was like an admission fee or a tuition fee, maybe. to learn the lesson. A bad way is by trying to win it back. So
Unfortunately, some of us take a lot
that's
longer to learn that lesson. And that, like, for me, it was a 15-year battle, right? It took me I was a very slow learner when it came to my gambling behaviors. But yeah, right when I got to that point and I realized I have to stop or this is going to take my life.
mm,
Not, I mean, it's taking everything I built up to this point. It's taken me so far away from the person that I just wanted to be in general.
mm,
It's like, for me, it wasn't just losing the $1,000 or whatever the comment said. It was about losing my integrity, losing
mm.
just who I wanted to be as a person. And that it just took me a long, long time to learn that lesson. But now, over 3.5 years in recovery, almost four, like, it's a lesson I don't need repeated.
I feel like the longer you go without it, you realize like the financial issues were just a symptom of the overarching problem. In the beginning, it's like this money needs to get paid back. So it's understandable, right? It's like we need to figure this out right now. Then when you have the space and you're not in that danger zone, you're like, oh, well, there was money, but there was so much more. And I'm sure we're going to dive into it through more questions. But let's move to this one. Please advise. I get jealous of my friend winning big. What would you tell someone who's in recovery or trying to quit gambling and they are finding that their friends keep posting their wins? Their friends keep talking about how much fun they're having, how great of a time it is. What would you say to them?
Get new friends.
Oh, that's a quick one.
I mean, and honestly, like, it's hard to be a person in recovery, and I say that in a way as, like, just get new friends, and understand that that's not always gonna be the answer, right? Like, it's
Well,
like,
on
"Oh,
that,
okay." Um,
yeah.
but I think one of the things is you have to kind of distance yourself from those situations. If you need to change your life and you need to get away from this behavior to be able to function and do better, like, you have to kind of put these walls up and these barriers in place and be like, you can either tell your friends, like, look, I'm trying to change my life. I'm trying to change this. I can't deal with this. And how they respond to that, which is completely out of your control. But if they're like, oh, okay, dude, I didn't know, or you know what I mean? Like that kind of situation, and they respond. And so really it's really it's tough. But you have to put those boundaries in place and say, look, this I'm trying to get away from this behavior. They're talking about it and still doing it, and you know is it necessarily like cut friendship ties? I don't know. It's definitely a distance situation where you're like, okay, I need to find other connections that maybe will help support where I'm going versus. And I get that there's history and all that stuff tied into it, but I had to leave friendships of almost 30 years to, you know, follow recovery, and it's tough.
This is one that I think is becoming a more difficult question to answer with how widespread gambling has become. When when I heard that, I would say when you say get new friends, and I know you said that bluntly and then you had more to say, but when I heard you say that, I said, "Well, I don't know if I could find friends that don't gamble at all." Now, the other thing is you have to tell them, of course, as you said, "Hey, I have a problem," or they're gonna keep talking about it because that's what they do for fun, most of them. So I was like, huh, I don't know if I could find friends that don't gamble at all. That sounds very difficult. So, what I would say for myself in this situation, what would make me feel better is recognizing that any wins that they're experiencing are just temporary wins. When I would win, what would happen? I would keep going and try to win more. And eventually, even if that took me months, which it didn't, but say it took me months to like go back, eventually it would get lost. And so when your friends are winning big, you're seeing just a snapshot. It's like the Instagram model pics, right? You're seeing a snapshot of someone's life, not the entirety of their life. You're seeing what they want you to see. And those are obviously going to be the good things. Because in society, we don't really share negative things unless you're like us and you just have a wanting for pain or something like that. So you come online every week and do a live stream about it.
And
But
I think that's kind of interesting to like our different demographic and age group, right? You're a young man in your mid 20s, and I am a middle aged woman in her mid 40s. And so it's like, it's a very, and I live in, I say the Midwest southern part of the US. And you live in the East Coast where gambling is far more predominant. Like Oklahoma, gambling is here. But a lot of us, like my age, we weren't raised around gambling because gambling just started here in the early 2000s. So it's like, yeah, my friend group could be a little bit more diverse than a young man from the East Coast situation. So I think that that's kind of an important thing to do. But finding connections of people, like you can, recovery is a really great space to find people who are just trying to navigate the same thing. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well too.
100%. Before we move on to the next question, I want to ask you in the audience to do me one favor. I want you to leave a like on this video, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. It'll help more people to come in and ask more questions. We're going to be here for the next 50 minutes talking about gambling, gambling addiction, and addiction recovery. So feel free to drop any questions that you have on the topic into the chat. Christina, this one I feel like I can take. I'm not sure if you know who these guys are, but if you
I do
do,
know.
then you can jump in. So streamers like Rothstein and Trainwrecks are people that will play on websites like Stake, and they'll live stream their slot play. And they're guys that are buying like $100,000 bonus buys. So like spending $100,000 on one click or more if they have access to a larger bet amount. Now he's asking in this question, are people that watch these streamers all day just gambling addicts trying to cope? Maybe. I think that there's generally a wide appeal in seeing another human being take a risk that you think is absurd. It's the same reason why people watch people skydive. Like, is that naturally a fun thing? I don't really think so for me, but I was watching gambling streamers for sure. And I did it in two different ways. The first way was to be inspired to see more games and more types of bets that I could personally place. That was when I was gambling. And then afterwards, it was like, oh, well, I will get my urges out by watching them. Turns out that both of those strategies were bad, and it continued the problem in my mind. So I can't really speak for the entire audience that's watching those videos, but I can tell you that I was watching it as a gambling addict trying to cope. So yes and no. Christine.
Well,
okay.
to follow up with that real quick though, here's the thing, and you had a great answer to that, but to the person who's watching them to try and like cope with their own urges and things like that, I just want to put out there that when you're still engaging, like your brain is still kind of reacting to those videos in the same way it would if you were the one physically pushing the button. So if you're saying, well, hey, it's not costing me anything to watch these people do it, one, it probably is inadvertently building urges. But two, your brain, the important part about recovery from gambling or any kind of dopamine antagonist kind of thing is you have to rewire your brain to look for dopamine in different ways, right? Whether it's rewiring it from gambling to get that reward center stuff. I'm not a brain person,
You're good.
but
You're right.
yeah, and it's just like you have to rewire your brain or else you're going to be battling these urges and these thoughts constantly. So even if you're not actively engaging in it by pushing the button or on your phone, your brain is still reacting to the whole thing. So it's like you really have to, even if it's a harm reduction step, you really have to limit what you're engaging in. Rewiring those pathways to maybe get those dopamine hits from exercise or just healthier things in general, right? So if you're just saying, hey, I'm not hurting myself, I'm not spending money, but I'm engaging in these for hours at a time, you're still keeping those pathways to gambling active, and you have to be able to break that.
I'd argue that if you're doing anything like for 8 hours consecutively in a day, it's probably bordering on a problem, regardless of what that thing is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's a couple different answers, I guess, for that question. It was a well asked question, I think.
Yeah.
Now, how do you deal with unsupportive people in your recovery?
This is a tough one because I think most of us in life in general, we're looking for validation in some areas of our life. And so if we're struggling or we're trying to do something different, and I struggled with this with my ex-husband, is just not understanding that gambling was even an issue. When I told him about my gambling issues, and his response to me was, that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You don't have a problem with gambling, you have a problem with money. And it's just like, well, both can be true. And here's the thing, I didn't need his validation. Yes, I wanted his support, but I think it really was one of those moments that made me realize that I had to find support in supportive people. And like trying to get support from trying to make other people understand what we're going through and support us when they don't understand it. Like that just adds more chaos to our already chaotic situation. So what I did was found support groups, found a therapist, found that support that will validate what I'm going through, that will help me build a path forward. And again, it kind of goes back to like friends who are gambling and encouraging you to go gamble and those types of things. Like that's not supportive. And it's like, and those are all these hard things that we have to do in recovery. They say addiction is hard, recovery is hard, choose your hard. And I much rather choose the heart of recovery every day.
You know what jumped into my mind when you were saying that is like, he sounds like a professional Instagram Reels commenter, like just something that I would see on mine. You don't have a gambling problem, you have a money problem, idiot.
Right.
That's some stuff I would get too. So I know it to a certain extent, but um, let's see. Why is denial so strong in this addiction? I'll lead on this one. If your identity has become gambling will solve my problems, and you have to admit that you have all these problems and that the one thing you thought was the solution is not actually a solution, it's really hard to come to terms with that. Which is why people get mad at me when I say like they're not going to make money gambling, is because in reality, they'll go, okay, if I can't make money gambling, I'm screwed. So I need to make money gambling. It's like a desperate belief that might not be logical, but feels like it has to be because we don't see the full picture when we're locked into that zone as a gambling addict. Do you have an opinion on that?
I mean, I think my side of it is like I was in denial for so long because I didn't want to let gambling go.
Mhm.
Like I knew that if I acknowledged that gambling was an addiction, that it was causing me harm, that I would be forced to have to let it go, and I wasn't ready because
Mm.
it was my coping mechanism for life. Even though it was also causing the problem, it's just like that toxic relationship where it's not good for you, but you just can't seem to walk away from it. And
Mm.
that's very much my situation with gambling, is that I didn't want to acknowledge it. I was in complete denial because I knew the minute I did, I would have to leave it behind. And that scared me at the time more than everything that was going on around me. Um,
It's fascinating because like gambling in itself is incredibly uncertain. You don't know if you're going to win or lose. You know you're supposed to lose if you're being honest with yourself, but you don't know what's going to happen on that specific bet. But so often, people that are struggling with gambling problems will say, well, that's the one thing I had control over because you're choosing to enter that uncertain situation. So it's like a little bit of backwards logic, but it makes sense to me because I went through it myself. It's like we don't know what lies ahead, but I know if I choose gambling, there's two results that could happen. I could win or lose. And within that, I feel like I'm in control. And that's how I felt, at least.
yeah.
Let's see. What's my first step to stop gambling? I'm winning, but I can't resist gambling every day. Well, in my 4 steps that worked for me, they were limiting your access to money by having someone else manage your account, finding alternative things to do with your time that mean something to you, self excluding from the casinos, meaning to ban yourself from playing there, and going to support group meetings. So, your first step is probably just asking that question that you just asked, I would imagine. But within that, those are the 4 steps. And if you need a video on it, check out my YouTube channel. Christina, any specific advice?
I just think if gambling is a problem in your life in any regards, whether it's time management, financial management, relationship management, gambling is just a thing that you're supposed to do occasionally. It's not meant to impact our life in any way. It's not meant to make any decisions for us. It's not meant to impact our future in any way. So it's just really kind of recognizing, where you are with gambling and how it's impacting.
Absolutely. How do you shed a gambling identity? I've been around gambling most of my life. Do you want to take that, or you want me to swing at
I'll
it?
let you start because I'm trying to think of like, how do you shed the gambling identity? Like,
I
what does
think
that mean?
so what it means to me is I am the gambler because when my friends ask me what I'm doing, I'm telling them about my wins. When they want to gamble, they come to me for tips. I'm the guy. I know everything when it comes to sports. I know everything when it comes to casino strategy, poker strategy. They come to me. I am the gambler. That sheds naturally with 2 things. One, when we start to lose, I lag a little bit. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm lagging. Yeah. All right, you jump in. I'll come back when I stop lagging.
No, I think that was a great point of like, if everybody thinks, oh, you're the guy that gambles, they're going to come to you with all that information. Right. And so, oh, there's an echo now too.
It's
So for me, I think, the further you get away from the bet, the further you get away from just the behaviors around the gambling, like, and probably just letting people know, hey, I'm stepping back from this, or, which is hard. I get it's easier said than done, but just kind of shedding, that persona.
okay. I think I'm back. I think I've stopped lagging. It was weird. I didn't even get I usually get notice right about here on my screen if I'm lagging, but I'm not. So let's just keep going and see what happens. This is good that we have 2 people in case one of us like drops off the internet. Let's see. Let's see. We got a little bit behind in questions, so I'm going to jump ahead. If we miss your question, feel free to just rephrase it and we will try to get to it. Okay. Am I addicted if I sports bet every day because I love sports, or am I addicted because if I lose money, I try to keep earning more? The overall sentiment of that sentence is you have a gambling problem. But what I think you should know is that you're not a sports fan. That was a myth that I had to bust for myself. I thought I was the biggest sports fan in the world because I wanted to watch every game and I wanted to bet on every game. But then I said, all right, if I'm not betting on this game, would I watch this game? And if the answer is no, you don't care about the sport. You just care about your opportunity to gamble on it. You do not love sports if you cannot watch it without gambling. I know you weren't a sports bettor, Christina, but can you kind of relate to that sentiment? It's like if your purpose in doing something is the risk reward, is that thing something you actually love?
Yeah, I'm like, can you separate it, right? Can you separate it out? Just exactly what you said. Can you watch the game and appreciate it for what it is, for the sport of it? Or is there always going to be this back of your mind, I should have placed a bet, or like I'm so bad, but like parlay or whatever all those things are. But it's like, should I have done this, or I should have done this? Like I knew I would have had it right. Like if that kind of overtakes your experience, then yeah, there's needs to be some work done there.
Yeah. When did you start to relearn the value of money again during your recovery?
Oof. For me, like, oh, I think this is very interesting because you and I are very like different. I think when it comes to like the money aspect of it, and I don't mean this in a good or bad way. I just mean like for me, it um wasn't about the money. But I always had bad money management skills. Like I've never really had a great relationship with money. So actually entering recovery was really the first time that I understood the importance of having a good relationship with money, making sure my money made me money, not giving it away and getting nothing for it. So it probably took me about um, a year into my recovery, working with a therapist, working with people to help me, hone in my budgets, my sponsor, and really just learning to appreciate money. And I still have barriers in place and things in place to just safeguard me. My sister still randomly checks my bank account to make sure that there's no gambling, like all the random ATM withdrawals or whatever, and she'll give me shit about my Starbucks orders and things like that. But it's still like it's just good to know that I have that in the background. My partner, like even though we keep everything very separate because I am a person in recovery from gambling, that's not his role, that's mine. But he's still very much like, we talk about the finances, we talk about all these things. So it's a journey when you've gotten so far away from it. But I think if you've had good money practices prior to gambling, and like it might be a little bit easier to kind of get back into, which you might be able to speak more to that because I feel like you did.
I I did. It was weird. Like I was always really good with money outside of gambling. Very good at saving it. Very like had a good respect for it. I think that there's two answers for me. The first is I relearned the value of money when I didn't have any and I was in debt and I had to work so hard to pay it off. But I still have this persisting issue that I don't think I've fully redefined what a lot of money is. I think that my numbers are still off in a way. Like before I started gambling, I was making $8 an hour at an ice cream store. Now I'm in a much, much different situation running a marketing firm. And I still struggle to be satisfied earning certain amounts, and I'm always desiring more. So, relearning the value of money from not wasting it, I've gotten that. But relearning the value of money to be appreciative of what I have is still something that I struggle with and I have to work on. It's been 3 years since, well, but since February 8th, 22, it's been 3 years. I made one bet between then and now, which was November the 12th. And I still am messed up. Like it's still not perfect, right? But it's a better problem to have to be able to work on that than to be in desperation mode trying to pay down debt.
Yeah.
So that's fair. Let's see. And again, guys, if we missed your question, feel free to rephrase them. We just got ourselves about 8 minutes behind on the questions. I want to catch us up. Let's see. Oh, Shreya says hi. Hi, Shreya. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Let's see. Here, this is an interesting point. It's actually the last comment that we got. So if we missed anything between then and the one that we previously hit, just feel free to re-ask it. We want to get to as many as possible. But this isn't even a question; it's just a statement, and I want to bounce this off of you. You don't acknowledge the problem until after you have nothing left. Was that exactly true for you?
Yeah. Yeah. When I was thinking about this, and I think I shared this in my episode that I did with you, is again, it goes back to that if I acknowledge it, then I have to let it go.
Mm.
And so, like, hindsight really showed me that. But in the moment, like, I didn't really have an understanding of addiction in general, aside from what's on the TV and the Dare program. Again, dating myself.
That was
Um,
me too.
it's like, aside from kind of what I was told, I didn't have real life experience with it. Like, there wasn't anybody in my immediate family that I knew was struggling with addiction. And so it wasn't like I had this real life, hey, this is an addiction. Like, it wasn't until I watched a show about food, shout out to, my 600-pound life. Um, until I watched this show about food and their whole like relationship with food, it wasn't until then that I had that moment of like, this is okay. I connected with everything she said about this, about the anticipation of the meal, how she felt eating, like she couldn't wait to order, she ordered herself a couple of pizzas. She couldn't wait, right? She was eating the food and like, oh, this is just heaven. This is amazing. And then after she was done eating, she ate all this food, right? And it was after she was done eating that she was like, I'm disgusting. Like, I can't believe I did this to myself. Why do I keep doing this to myself? I'm killing myself. And it was in that moment that I was like, damn, like that's my experience. And so it took me watching a show in the middle of the night after a gambling binge, all broke in so many different ways, not just financially, that I was just like, yeah, this is a real problem. And it was in that moment that I tried to acknowledge it more for what it was, but it was still a lot of fear of like, yeah, this is killing me, but I don't know if I can let it go.
I saw like 5 likes come in as you were talking about that, so people really resonated with that. I would take that as, or I'm just nut and I just equate these things to each other. But I think you're exactly right. And sometimes it takes seeing someone in a very different position exhibiting the same actions to come to terms with it. And so that's why making this kind of content is helpful, I hope, because people see other people's stories and they're like, wow, that sounds like something I would do. And, with this question exactly, or with the statement, it's like, yeah, if you're winning a bunch of money, you're winning a bunch of excuses. You're saying, here's all this money that I won, so that means I can win it again. Until you're out of money, you're like, well, I have this, I might as well use it to get more. And it's just like if you literally see every dollar as an excuse to continue to gamble, well, that's something only a problem gambler would do, obviously, but that's exactly what I'm trying to express. It's like until you're at the bottom, you always have an excuse. And that's when people make changes usually. I wanted to put my own comment in the chat so that I can put it up on screen. Because yeah. You said the DARE program. And the other day I did an interview on the phone, and the woman asked me, what can we do to get more young people to understand the dangers of gambling addiction? Should we make like videos and have them show in like their health classes in high school? And I remember that the video that I saw two that I can remember in health class. One was about alcohol, one was about mushrooms. Both of them made me want to do that more, and then I did it. And so it was like the way that it was expressed was so extreme and so corny that I had the thought of like, let me just tell you what happened in the mushroom one. All right, so the girl takes the mushrooms. She's at a party, everything's crazy and fun, and then she goes, woo, and then jumps out a window and dies. And I'm like, what an idiot. Why would she jump out the window? She was having such a good time before. Like, I would be able to do it responsibly or different. Let me go and try it. And it was like within a week, it was done. Right. So my thought was like, we need to be very careful about how we do that because it might make people want to gamble more. And that was a fear of mine through some of my content. Is seeing this content making people want to gamble more, not triggering them, but maybe making them think like this guy's a loser and I would never be like him. Do you see the danger in that?
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things though that makes it really hard for the preventionists,
Yeah.
right? That work in this space is they're like, how do we reach people in a way that they're going to understand it? And we're talking about like I even like for instance last night I was at a family member's house and we play I'm just fixing to out myself here as a big O nerd, but we play Dungeons and Dragons. And while we're playing this, their teenage son was playing a game and he has money from Christmas and stuff. And so he's buying whatever things for this game.
Mhm.
And, we're sitting there playing with our other family members and it was like ding, ding, $10, ding, ding, $20. And I was just like, I don't like, I don't spend my days preaching to my family members about, hey, that's dangerous.
Mhm.
But it's one of those, and it was probably an opportunity to talk about it. And they've actually asked me a few times if some behaviors they should watch out for with their kid. Um, and so I think they're pretty mindful of it, and they, engaging in that. But I think my overall point on that is like, how do we? I got a little bit off track there, but it's kind of like an everyday situation. Like, how do we reach these kids and say, hey, this could potentially be an issue?
Mhm.
Um, and I remember when I was working with the Oklahoma Association for Problem Gambling, and I remember saying, what are we doing in schools to really educate about this? Especially as I think we're adding 3 or 4 more casinos this year to our state, which already has like 150, 145, 146 casinos.
Yeah.
And it's like, how, like, this needs to be something. And I remember I was told that there's not enough time in the curriculum to add gambling into the conversation. And I'm like, well, it's just as destructive as drugs and alcohol.
Mhm.
But it's like take 5 minutes of that time and just say, "Hey, this can be a problem. This can be an issue." But really it's all going to be on how us as individuals perceive it,
Mhm.
right? Just because I went through the DARE program and heard about drugs and alcohol doesn't mean that it actually was like, "Ooh, drugs and alcohol are bad." It
Right.
was just more of like I've never gone that direction in my life in general. It wasn't because, oh, that DARE program told
Right.
me to watch out for this. It was more just like, I don't know, my own personality type. I've
Mhm.
never really been somebody who, like, that's why gambling, I think, got me. Like, because all of these things to me are just symptoms of internal issues, right? Whatever they are. And so for me, it just happened to be gambling, but it could have easily been drugs or alcohol had I been in those environments.
Mhm. I don't know if I just like expose myself for being messed up in the head because I don't know if that was like the normal reaction to seeing that video, like
I
what I
think it
felt.
probably is.
I would feel better if it was personally because it made me like immediately do the action. I don't know. I feel like I'm one of those people that struggle with authority too. So if you tell me not to do something, it's almost certain that I'm going to do it or at least try it. And then decide for myself. So I try not to say like you have to stop gambling, even if it's like better for people. Like I try to just express what might happen if they do, but it's a tough balance. And like this is another aside, I guess. But when people, you said you don't try to like preach to your family. I see people in public that recognize me from like YouTube or TikTok, and
Ooh.
I'll almost always exclusively find them at a bar, and I'll almost always exclusively be pretty drunk. And then they come up to me and they're like, "Rob, like you're awesome, man. I love your content." And I'm like, yeah, yeah, man. Like, thank you so much." And I'm trying not to like let them know like I'm not sober right now because I don't know. It feels like I have to uphold this standard since I make content about not getting addicted to things of like always being sober, always being proper. And I'm not. I'm like really not. Like what you guys see online is me trying to help you not do what I did, but I'm not like I really don't follow rules very well at all in any sense of the word. So just
I
as like,
wouldn't know that seeing you karaokeing, like I would have never, like had I not experienced this version of Rob, and he could probably say the same of myself the few times in my life that I have a beer too many. But I think, we're all just trying to make better decisions in the moment. And like, are we perfect? No. But we try.
I think I'm lagging again. So I'm going to put a question up and I'm going to toss it over to you. And again, if I'm not lagging anymore. I'm fine. If you're in the chat right now, do me a favor and leave a like on this video. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that subscribe button. And if you want to know any extra information about myself or Christina, just check the description of the YouTube video. And feel free to ask any questions you have about gambling, gambling addiction, or addiction recovery. Christina, how can I block my financials or give up control when I don't have a loved one or a trusted person to handle them? And I guess this would be a perfect time for an ad spot, but we don't have a sponsorship from them. But you might as well say it anyway.
Well, are you talking about GameFin?
I was talking about TrueLink.
Oh, TrueLink. Okay. I'm like, which one are we talking about? Because there's so many resources, but TrueLink is a great option. It's a card, and some states offer like payees. Like you can find payees, people who sometimes your therapist will do it. Sometimes there's programs that allow you to do it. But TrueLink is a card that protects you from like being taken advantage of. So it connects to your bank account, and you can have a trusted person, or just it can just be a coworker go in and set up all your like no cash at ATMs, no online gambling allowed, all these different, like so many different settings. You can have them. It's got to be somebody you kind of trust, right? Because they can set up a password where you can't go in and change any of those things. Now, is it going to be 100% barrier? No, like nothing is 100%. Like this is just to give you that space to kind of take a moment and say, this isn't what I really want, or to make it a little bit more challenging to engage in the gambling behavior. You can also self-exclude at every.com. I'll have you put it in the links. It's a link where you can self-exclude from Every, which is the ATM system throughout most of the casinos in the US. And so you can actually go in there, put your banking information, and you need to put all your information in there. Don't just pick and choose, because then that doesn't work either. And what it does is you won't be able to use the ATM systems. You won't be able to cash a check at the cage. You won't be able to do any of those things. And so that's a fantastic way. You can also go to your bank. They will have options to turn off online gambling transactions. Like there's a lot of things that you can do to put those financial barriers in place. And so, yeah, those are some really helpful kind of things.
Can you tell me how to spell that group?
It's
Every?
EVERI, I think.
Okay. And it would be
And
.com.
yeah, and you'll see there's a self-exclusion form. I can pull up the link on the side here. And then you can, so that will, like, if most of you are casino gamblers, you've seen those machines in the casino there. I think it's pretty much throughout the US. And that's just a really good way. Put your credit card information in, put your banking information in. You won't be able to access funds to any of those.
I'm going to make a video about that because I didn't know about that until right now. Glad we did this live. That should be a good video. This is so Pat, to preface this, Pat, I'd seen some of your comments before on some of the YouTube videos, and I'm drawn to agree with you almost completely with what you're saying. Oftentimes what the struggle is finding ways to involve thought leaders from this community without them stepping on the toes of the people that fund them. It's very, very difficult to say what you want to say unless you're like Christina or I, who can basically come on here and say whatever they want. So that's a side note before I read your question. Now, normalizing gambling is a recent phenomenon. Vegas was one time a destination where people would travel to indulge every so often. Now, with lotteries and online gambling, Pandora's box is opened, meaning this mass legalization and mass normalization of gambling is leading to problems. Christina, how have you seen gambling change from before to after it going online?
Oh, yeah. Well, just the ads. Like that's all you have to say is just the advertising is one of the biggest changes. Aside from just the accessibility factor, like making it so much easier. Like I was an in-person gambler, so the thought of like getting dressed and going like it was a whole process, right? And I was one of those people that actually wore my clothes to the casino and not my PJs. I did have some, like lines, and one was you have to change your clothes. But it's like, and I mean, I'm kidding, but really that is kind of what happens to us. We deteriorate. But yeah, just the accessibility, all the ads. I did just learn, I know, the TikTok. I don't know if I can even say that on here. Is
Anyway, so just go.
Yeah, so it's going to be gone soon, but I did realize, I just noticed, because a lot of the content that I watch is like Rob's content on my TikTok. And so it just like was popping up all these dang ads for apps and things like that. You can go in and actually change the setting and turn them all off. And this is new. Like you haven't been able to do that in the past. And so it was a really frustrating process for me. Because I do content and I watch content doesn't mean I want to watch, you know, all these ad things. But yeah, advertising, even like one of the YouTube shows that I really enjoy watching, it's Perkins Builder Brothers, shout out. Like we're for some reason they're just a great group of guys that build, and my partner Dustin and I like to watch these shows because we're projects and things. And they had an ad that was for one of the online sites, and I don't want to give them a shout out because I'm just not like that. And I was I was just so frustrated that these people posted this on there. And so I went into the comments later because I was like, I may have to stop watching them if I'm gonna have to deal with this. And not that they're triggering for me, it's just principle for me these days. And they got so much backlash in the comments that they took the video down. And I was so like happy to see that. Like, of course you're going to have your handful of people like, why are you guys making such a fuss over this? And those are people who have never struggled with gambling, right? Or who aren't recognizing it's a problem in their life. You're always going to have those people who are just like, you guys are a bunch of babies, But at the most of us, the majority of us is like, this is really harming our country. This is really harming, people in our lives. I don't want to see this advertisement. So, I mean, there is definitely a shift both ways.
Yeah. I notice a really strong differentiation between gambling and substances when it comes to advertising. Like, imagine the outrage from parents if Mr. Beast took on a sponsorship from Bud Light. Like,
Right.
if Mr. Beast was sponsored, this Bud Light, we're drinking $1 Bud Light versus $1 million Bud Light, like something like that, right? Well, that would be outrage. But he runs a Feastables lottery through his chocolate bars where people are looking for a golden ticket like Willy Wonka to be in a video about Willy Wonka. And it's like, that's cool. That's great. Like, we love that, but not the alcohol. That's the problem. So there's like, it's picking and choosing what you want to be like morally pleasing. And I think that if we're in a society where people are going to get outraged over any like substance, we need to have that same outrage for things that can cause the same damage. And we don't see it. It's just lagging behind. But I would love, I might make a video about that, about like Mr. Beast and the Bud Light sponsorship. I think it could be funny.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's dive into this piece. And before we dive into this piece, if you're in the chat right now, do me a favor and leave a like on this video. We are up to 60 people across platforms, which for YouTube and Facebook streaming is a ton. And I'm happy that you guys are here spending your Saturday, or if you're watching on the replay, whatever day you're watching, with us. Hopefully we can provide some value to you. And if you have any questions about gambling addiction, or addiction recovery, drop them in the chat. There's no difference between drug addiction and gambling addiction, except that gambling can be more hidden. I will say that gambling can be more hidden. That's a valid point, but there are some other differences. And I would love to hear your opinion before I give mine.
My opinion? That I was just thinking about this question. Like, addiction overall is addiction. Anytime we lose the ability to control our behaviors, we make completely irrational thoughts seem rational, right? We make excuses for things we would never make excuses for. Like, there's a commonality amongst all people who struggle with addiction, right? Because I just want to point out, addiction doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care our background. It doesn't care, how big our house is, or what car we drive, or how many degrees we have on the wall. Like, addiction just really likes to needle in to the little cracks in our lives, right? The avoidance, the stress, the hurt, the trauma, the abuse. Like, these are just like ways for addiction to seep in. So all of that is a commonality. But like for gambling addiction, it's like one of the biggest difference is the stigma, I think, attached to it. Like, that's one of the ones that I'm going to go for, because kind of the overall theme for our conversation is like, other things seem to be more acceptable if you're struggling with it. Alcohol, substance, those seem to me like, oh, okay, all right, well, good for you for getting back on track and doing what you're doing. But you struggle with gambling, and there's still this overall mix, especially for women.
Gambling.
Like,
what's wrong with you? Just stop.
Right. Like, it seems to be a moral failing, or a financial problem, not an actual addiction that actually has changed the way that we think and we do things. So I think that really kind of plays into the shame and the stigma and hiding it, and like, because people aren't going to understand. And so I would say the stigma is one of the biggest reasons why it's a more hidden addiction. But with substance and alcohol, like there's a physical change that you can see on people, right? You know, if you drink a lot, you're going to look tired and like more. And don't look at me today. I just didn't have enough time to like throw some makeup on and do something because I had meetings this morning. But it's really kind of that there are physical things that happen with putting chemicals and things in our bodies, whereas gambling, we aren't doing that, right? It's more of the mental component, and so it's easier to hide.
I saw another comment come in that's kind of directly relevant to this, so I'm going to throw it up now. And this is kind of what I was thinking. Gambling is the only addiction you can profit from in the short term, but you have to play out the full picture. You're always going to end up losing it. But the fact that you can make money doing it leads to this thought of one more bet could solve all of my problems, which is wrong, but it's a thought that we all probably had. And the reason that we have it is because in practical numbers terms, it could solve the financial issues in the short term if you got to win. In the end, it's always going to go back. You're going to run that debt back up. You're going to end up in a worse situation. Yes. But having that, the financial aspects is what makes this addiction so difficult to quit. It's that we can justify continuing to solve problems. You're not someone, if you have an alcohol problem, you're not going to literally tell yourself, one more handle of vodka will cure all of the problems that I have. But if you have a gambling problem, you might say, well, if I just have one big win, then I don't have any debts anymore and I can move forward. And this kind of thought leads to this cycle of just endlessly repeating the same action. And it's very, very dangerous and it's very difficult to break that cycle. Christina,
Yeah.
can you still hear me? Because you are lagging.
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Just not seeing you. So I will do a bunch of dances to stimulate the people that can only see one screen now. But again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Let's see. Do you think that rising costs of living make people want to gamble because their salaries don't pay them well enough? Yes, I mean, absolutely. The gambling market has always been pitching or marketing towards people who are in poor financial situations. And I'm lagging. Do you want to jump in?
The internet is great, but I think anytime, and I don't know if it's my internet or your internet, but it's just fun. Anytime I think there's that opportunity to get us out of our situation, like that's the lure of gambling, right? That's the lure of why people do it, is to like the promise of a quick reward, an easy reward. But here's something that was said to me in recovery: like any future win is only a future loss. And here's the difference, I think, with somebody who has a problem with gambling or an addiction with gambling and somebody who doesn't, is those reasons. Like if you're gambling to make your life easier, there's a problem. If you're gambling as entertainment, you've set this budget, you've got, hey, I'm going to play $50, I'm going to spend an hour in here, and you leave it and don't think about it again, you're probably all right. You're in that 90, and they say 90-10. I think it's probably more like 75-25, but you're going to be in that percentage that does it for the intended purpose, entertainment. But if you're doing it for any other reason, if you're like, oh, I have a $200 electric bill, but I only have $100 in my bank account and I still got to get gas and groceries. And you're like, I'm just going to go up to the casino, take my $100, triple it, and should be able to cover everything. Right. That's not a normal mentality. That's not rational thinking. And so it's like, if that's your thought process to be like, I'm going to go and get more money, that's never going to be a solution. Gambling is never going to be a solution to any problem.
Yeah. You said you think it's probably close to 75-25 in terms of people who don't struggle with a gambling addiction versus do. I think it's probably closer to 50-50 if you go by like an arbitrary definition. So like when you look at binge drinking or alcoholism, one of the qualifying factors is binge drinking. So if you're drinking, I think it's like 6 or 7 drinks a week, you're considered drinking too much. And if we take the subsection of college students across America, you could say that the majority of them might be alcoholics by that definition. So I think we're struggling with this because we're defining people as gambling addict or not gambling addict. But there's probably a large portion of the population that are doing gambling in a way that is a problem, but aren't fully at this point of a gambling addiction. I think it's like 50% of people, if I were to guess, that are gambling. Because what's the recommended amount? Probably like once a week. Like what is it? We don't
If
have that.
that.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't
I
have
don't
that.
even think it's that. I think it's once or like a handful of times a year is
Yeah.
what they say is kind of healthy. Like maybe 4 to 6 times a year is supposed to be kind of normal. It's just like it's not supposed to be anything more than like you go to a movie, right? You pay and you actually go to the cinema and you do that. That's entertainment. You go to the casino for a couple hours. That's entertainment. Um, again, anything we do in our life, no matter what it is, should be, not harmful to our life. And it's like, and just to kind of close that out, like when I was in the struggle, I would always have a number in my head of like, if I could win this, I'd be able to stop and walk away. Right. I won that. And I still continued to gamble. I kept moving that goalpost further and further and upping that amount of money because the losses kept upping. So it's like when you're in this mindset and you're like having these negotiations in your head of like, if I do this, maybe I can cover my bills for this week. Or if I do this, maybe I can pay off everything and stop gambling. Like if you're having those negotiations in your head, like it's a real sign to be like, just stop the bleeding right now, right? And start the healing process. And it's like when we stop that bleeding of finances and all of these things, like when we start to, like, things come back, we start to heal, we start to rebuild, things come back in a much healthier way. It's not going to be overnight, but they do come back.
I want to put you in an impossible situation. And I want to ask
Love
you a
it for me.
question that no one can answer. And the fact that no one can answer it is the problem. What is responsible gambling? Define it.
Well, I don't know the actual like dictionary term for responsible gambling. And this is always such a hard line, right? Especially as advocates in this space. Like we have to be able to all of us people who are RG, people, industry, people who are advocates, like we all have to be able to come to the table, right? So responsible gambling is gambling responsibly.
What does that
And
mean?
but I think it means that you set a time and a budget and you stick within those times in the budget. You do it in a healthy way. You say, okay, for this year, I have $2,000 I can allot to miscellaneous things. And you stay within that $2,000 budget. And I'm talking a year budget, not this week. But whatever, like somebody can maybe comfortably afford to gamble $2,000 and it's not going to impact their life in any way. It's not going to affect if they can pay their mortgage. It's not going to affect if they get money in savings. It's not going to affect their retirement. Like it's really just understanding. Like I saw a quote one time or a comment the other time where like, I'm so tired of being shamed because I gamble. And it's like, and this was in like a TikTok video I was watching.
Who's showing you?
And yeah, she's like, I'm so tired of being shamed because I like to gamble. I can afford to gamble. And it's like, one, that's always a red flag to me. Somebody who's defending their gambling is always a red flag to me. Two, like, I don't shame anybody for gambling. Like, I am not here to tell you to quit gambling if gambling is healthy for you. I'm just here to share my experience and and show that it can be a harmful thing. So, responsible gambling, to bring it all back around, is gambling responsibly. And that means being able to stick to a budget, not going beyond that budget, it not impacting any aspect of your life. And remember, gambling is just entertainment. It's not going to decide where you go on vacation. It's not going to decide whether or not you can pay your kid's soccer bill that month. You know what I mean? Like it's not meant to make any decisions in your life.
I'm glad you were a good sport about that one because I meant to put you in an impossible situation. Because, all right, rephrase the question now and change the word gambling to drinking. What is responsible drinking? I can tell you what that is. I can tell you that if you're over a blood alcohol level of 0.08, you're not supposed to drive a car. I can tell you that as a mathematical fact based on a law. Now, this is all going to be from me, my opinion. So if anything comes from this, it's me. There's no such thing as responsible gambling because we don't have a number to put on it. I like what you said. What you said is a great strategy to try to reduce the amount of damage you're doing to yourself. If you set a budget and you stick to it, that's great. What percentage of your income should that budget be? What amount of time should you be spending in the casino? There's no guidelines. There's no numbers to it. There's no percentages. And so it's always just do what you can afford, but that's too subjective. So by objective definition, we can't say that it exists. And what the truth is that someone who is fulfilling responsible gambling would never even question anything because they wouldn't be experiencing any negatives. They wouldn't have to think, am I spending too much? Because they wouldn't be feeling any pressure. They don't have to think, am I spending too much time here? Because they're not feeling anything lost from their life, right? So by putting this term out there, I think all we're doing is trying to keep gambling addicts playing for longer.
Well, and it's how they defer responsibility as well.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a deflection of responsibility. If you say, hey, it's not really on us, that for like the operators or industry, and they say, hey, and again, I'm not for or against it. I just go from my own lived experience. But if the industry says, hey, or operators are like, the responsibility is on you guys. Like we're offering all these things. The responsibility is on you to do it responsibly. And you're like, well, what does that even mean? Like you're offering these highly addictive machines and these highly addictive opportunities. You're making access so easy. It's like they're literally brick by brick paving yellow brick road to addiction so that you can see it. But yet they're saying it's not our responsibility. It's really on you. Then that, that's really in my own, and I'm getting a little bit of cross the line by talking about this. And again, I try to be respectful because everybody needs to be at the table. You know what I mean? So that we can figure this out. But again, it's a deflection of responsibility is really what the whole RG campaign. And I do get a little, testy about it because like, yes, we have our own accountability. I'm not out there saying, hey, it's your fault that I struggled with this for as long as I did. Mm-hmm. But I'm just saying, I'm going to take accountability for my own actions and my own choices. But I'd like you to take some accountability on your end to help create resources, create more information, awareness, to have more opportunities to say, hey, this could be harmful. Mm-hmm. But again, it's like that kind of tobacco industry thing of like, we don't want the responsibility on us because that's costly.
Yeah. The wording of the law says that like with alcohol commercials, they cannot actively promote people to gamble or to drink more. So they can advertise their product. They can make the Corona bottle look crispy and that you want to drink it. And they can have Pedro Pascal on there. They can do all the same things that the gambling commercials are doing. But the difference is in the tagline. The difference on an alcohol commercial is like, drink responsibly and our product exists. The gambling one's like, gamble responsibly, but here's $300 if you just show up, and we're going to keep sending you $100 a week because we love you so much and you're so fucking cool. Like that's the difference in how the advertising is received. And so I think that's where the problem lies. And, we called out an entire group basically I called out an entire group basically by saying, what is responsible gambling? I don't think that group has to, in fact, be a bad thing. I think it can do great things. I think that we need to define it. If we don't define it, we're enforcing nothing.
Yeah, very true. And I don't know how many of the viewers, and this could be again a generational thing, but how many have the $1,000 air fryer? And why I say it's a $1,000 air fryer is because like it's part of the free gifts, right? That they get you in. They're like, oh, but I got to go get my air fryer today, which is $40 at Walmart. But yet it costs you so much money. You think you're entitled to it. And I guess you are. I'm not saying think, you feel entitled to it because you paid so much money to get this thing. And it's like, in reality, you did. And you paid, 100 times what the thing was worth. And it's just like that harmful cycle. And it's like, just leave the air fryer there, go to Walmart, buy yourself the $40 air fryer if you need an air fryer. But like, I've heard so many people who have gotten so much free stuff that they've helped other people, stockpile their house because of all the free gifts. And it's like, what is that really costing you though? They think, oh, I've got all these free gifts. It kind of makes up for it. It's like, no, it really doesn't, considering they got all those at bulk anyway. Yeah. So it's like, it's just they can afford to do that, so it's just like, I just wonder in the comments, like how many people have the $1,000 air fryer?
How many people were drawn in by casino comps or free play and then justified losing a bunch of money by saying that the comp was worth it? oh, well, at least I got a toaster because I lost 10 grand on craps or something like that. But why don't we touch on a couple more questions? We're coming up on that hour mark. I'm good to keep going for a little bit if you want to, but if not,
Sure.
we can wrap. All right,
Yeah,
let's
there's
do a
been a
couple
lot
more.
of interaction.
Absolutely. This has been a good one. I told myself no gambling in 2025 to start my end to this horrible addiction. I'm tired of paying the casino's electric bill. Fair enough. How long does it take for the temptations to stop for you two? A year? For me, it was like 5 or 6 months, I think.
Uh, for me, like this is always kind of a tough one because I never really struggled with after my March 6th date because I had such a rough time with the acceptance piece. Like, because, I wanted to not be here anymore. And so for me, like, that's how far it took me. Like, I had constant thoughts of like, how am I going to leave this earth and things like that. And I'm trying to be careful so we don't get banned with that. Is it was just so hard for me and life was just so heavy and I just didn't want to be here anymore. And so once I finally kind of acceptance of like, this is where my life is. And if I don't change, if things don't change, I won't be here anymore. I will figure out that plan. I will, and that scared me so much more than all of the reasons why I was avoiding recovery and stopping gambling. The fear of not wanting to be here anymore and leaving my family and just the overwhelming tiredness I felt, just weary in my bones felt like that flipped the switch in me. And a lot of people have asked me, how do you do that? And I'm like, that was a very honest moment in myself that I can't replicate for you. I wish I could. That switch, not the feeling of emptiness.
Right.
But that changed things for me. And so it's like and the very next day, I let my mom into it and I haven't looked back since. So urges didn't really hit me until like right around the year mark and right around the holidays. Like, and a lot of that was nostalgia. And then when it came to the year mark, a lot of that was just scared of like, what if I let everybody down? By then I was already doing the podcast and I'd started the Facebook group. And it was like, I felt like an enormous responsibility to everybody I was helping and talking to of like, if I relapse or have a setback, like what does that mean for me and for this work? And I felt an enormous amount of pressure, but I didn't have like the everyday struggle of it.
Yeah. That's a whole different point is like putting it out online. How does that add to your own recovery? For me, I feel like I still operate best under extreme pressure. So if you guys subscribe, it adds more pressure for me not to relapse. So I like that, but it's not for everyone. I know that. I saw this comment and I wanted to kind of jump on it. Do you think normal gamblers can win or lose a couple $100s and be indifferent to either and have no desire to change their infrequent gambling style no matter the outcome? No, I don't. I think that for the large majority of people, they're going to recognize that after a certain amount of losses, they need to leave. But when it comes to wins, I think wins are so disorienting that even if it's not like to an extreme, right? If someone goes into a casino and they win $100, I don't see a lot of people saying, "Okay, let's walk away." I see a lot of people saying, "Okay, I'm going to put 50 away and then the other 50 is house money." And I think that's probably the more likely scenario for a normal gambler, whereas a problem gambler would say, "Oh, I have 100, let's put 100 back in." I really don't see a scenario where people win comfortably and walk away. It's just so fascinating to me to think about, but I don't see it. Could
I
be
think
wrong.
I see it more in like kind of the older generation that are just used to kind of like they're retired and they just spend their days at the casino. Like they have this kind of frugality and this mindset. So I have seen that. So I think there's always in anything that we talk about when it comes to this, there's always going to be that percentage where, yeah, that could probably happen. But I think you know, there's going to be those gamblers who that's just what they're going to do. Like but it's not really affecting them other
Yeah.
than they're spending their days there. Um, but I think, yeah, maybe if they do hit the ups and downs, but like I know an older couple that gamble quite frequently and like anything they win does go into hey, this is our gambling pot. And when that gambling pot is empty, if they've already pulled out whatever they've allotted for the week, they stop.
Yeah.
And they've been doing this for probably 10 years.
Mhm.
So it's like yes, there are moments, but that's their story. And it's like that gets kind of into the comparativeness of like,
Yeah.
well, if they can do it, then I should be able to do it. And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that.
Unfortunately, it does not. We had a nice comment come in, so I just wanted to throw that up on screen. Love you guys. Thank you all for being here today. Thanks for asking all the questions. Once again, if you're looking for information about what Christina does, if you're looking for information about what Christina does, check the description of the YouTube video for a link to her website and Facebook group. And to anyone that's been here that's been enjoying the time, leave a like, leave a comment if you want, and drop a follow and or subscription. We'd love to have you along for the journey. Any parting words, Christina?
This was just a lot of fun. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for the comments and interacting. I'm sorry we didn't get to every comment, but I've read them all and like fantastic interaction. So thank you so much. There wasn't anything mean, and I'm grateful for that.
Much different than if we were to put this out on Instagram or TikTok. The two places filled with I don't know what we were talking about earlier, just professional trolls. We
Yeah.
get them on YouTube sometimes, but to you YouTube subscribers, I love you guys. This is the platform that I want to grow this message on, and hopefully we get Christina posting as well pretty soon. We just had 3 reels edited for you. I'm going to send them to you after this call, and make sure you guys drop her a follow on all her socials so that you see them. Cool. All right. To everyone that's been watching, thank you for joining. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the love. Let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.